And so we're on to Friday, the 21st of August, 2026. And for those of you that like to enjoy the Friday feeling, there's some really good aspects on Friday, but there is one I want to pay some attention to, and that's the one that I'm going to start with. That's Venus in an opposition to Saturn. Now, on Friday, the 21st, this is when Venus goes exactly into an opposition with Saturn. Truthfully, however, it's been coming in for a good week. And this is the pinnacle of that interaction between Saturn and Venus. And it will then start to pass out for another week or so. By the 30th, it's totally sort of disbanded. So what is it about Venus and Saturn that's worth knowing about? Well, I want to put a few scenarios to you. Now, I know this energy because I've got this in my birth chart, and it can be really tricky to manage. It's not that easy because Venus is all about, and let's unpack it now. Venus is about our connections. It's about how we value things. Venus shows how we relate to people, and it also shows how we can be close to people. Now, by comparison, Saturn shows us where we might feel separate, where we might have a strong need to judge, to make things serious. It's quite a serious planet. It is deeply practical, and it is known for being a bit of a grouch. Now, all planets have positive sides and negative sides, but when they're stressed, for instance, in a square or in an opposition, that's when you tend to see the worst of those aspects. So, for instance, Saturn in an opposition to a planet can get grouchy, mean, it can be stingy, it can be scarce. It brings up a real sort of like meanness. And Venus, when she's stressed out, she starts to doubt herself. So that lovely flowing energy starts to get a bit clipped, and she can get a little bit over emotional as well. So how is this likely to work? Well, first of all, I think this is like the tired heart, like Saturn tires out Venus's energy. So Venus, that is wanting to be loving and kind and supportive and to feel really good about herself, is likely to get tired out by that feeling that there's a grouch nearby. And, in our bodies, we might just feel less vibrancy. We might feel kind of worn out, like bone weary, like our vitality is completely like sapped out. Also, I should say, at this time, Saturn and Mars are still in a square, and Venus and Mars are in a square. Venus, it is about the flow of things. Saturn is about the limitation of things, and then Mars is about our vitality. So we really could feel the lack of vitality around this time. But I want to give you some scenarios because it might be easier to recognize it. So, for instance, the Venus side of you pay somebody a compliment, and the Saturn side of somebody that you're responding with or having a conversation, paying a compliment to, it lands badly, or they negate it. They take away the goodness. It's almost like your good deed gets flipped into something that feels unnecessary, unimportant, and it's as if you get a little bit of a slap back. When you respond to somebody with kindness, or you get cut off, you get ghosted, you feel that there's no response. It's like your kindness is responded to with coldness. Is another thing. You might find if you've got to manage something to do with money, you might find that money feels tight around this time. That's quite a normal thing. You might find that when you want to be affectionate with somebody, that you're meeting up against a wall. Similarly, this could be you feeling like the wall, you feeling like I don't deserve that compliment, you feeling like, if someone's giving you something, you might be the one that's like, no, I don't want that, I don't deserve that. So there's a very sort of undeserving script that's playing out or can play out. You might feel guilty about enjoying pleasure. You might be involved in creative activities and then think they're bad, like they don't match up to what you're expecting, what you're hoping for. And so my advice here with this Venus opposition to Saturn is to not make what happens on Friday the evidence of your failures, because it would be really easy to quantify that, all of the things that could happen on Friday, as I am of no value, nothing I do goes well, and I must be a bad person, or I must be bad at creativity. I must not be a great person to hang around with, although this person, because otherwise this person would want to hang out with me. You might just find that there is a lack, there is a scarcity, but you mustn't make that mean that it's because you're not good enough. So anything that could lead to that belief, and if you hold that belief about yourself, you've got to be more vigilant, because it could absolutely come out at this time. So what can you do about it? Now, before I leave that with you, like that big question, what can you do about it? I want to share some examples. So there are two famous people that I've got here just to share, so you can see how it might play out. Now, obviously, I don't know them personally. All I know is how they appear in the public domain, or have appeared in the public domain, and a little bit about the backstories. Again, I don't know them personally, but one of them, Julie Andrews, if you think about the roles she's played, she has Venus in an opposition to Saturn in her birth chart. And Julie Andrews, she's known for elegance and discernment. She plays really strong women. That's a kind of boundaried Venus, where she's using discernment, and that actually could be a very good reflection of how Venus and Saturn play in her chart. Eventually, she became a dame, so she played lots of strong women. She played women who challenged things. She played women that learnt not to take things personally. She played tough women, always a woman, always tough. She had some strength. And so in the way that I've seen her, I'm projecting my thoughts on her. I see the strength of Venus in how she's been portrayed or has portrayed her roles. So what we're seeing here is a strong sense of value. Like, I am of good value, and therefore I'm going to have some boundaries, and I need it to be quality. This is about quality, not quantity. And so, there's a sort of strong feminine energy there. Another famous person would be Jimi Hendrix. Now, he had Venus and Saturn in opposition in his birth chart. And in his childhood, he's known for having had a childhood of neglect with lots of coldness. So he didn't get the goodness that he needed. Like, the goodness was denied from him. He is also known as being sort of like rejected. His music, it is great, by the way. I loved his music. But he sang about like love that maybe never matched up. There was this kind of longing, this intense emotional ache. And then there was difficulties with addictions and things like that. Now, one thing you might find with Venus and Saturn in an opposition is that not good enough. I wasn't good enough to be looked after. I wasn't good enough to get my needs met. And I wasn't good enough that my relationships lasted. There was always something, there was always a scarcity going on. So, what we've got here is the difference. And he was apparently reputed to put barriers up to love as well. So kind of go all in and then kind of pull out. So, we've got these stories of either the sort of classic discerning boundaries that we might sort of see in that sort of Mary Poppins image. Or we've got the idea of there's a barrier, there's a restriction, Saturn is there restricting us. So yeah, artistic discipline and poise versus the intense emotional ache that I was talking about. I think Venus and Saturn together in this opposition, it challenges our sense of self-worth for sure. And that is when we start to question ourselves. So if we do get a slight off comment on Friday, we might take it personally. So I would say this is this could affect you to the level of self-esteem issues that you currently have. If you do find that you keep yourself really open and kind, very open, even to people that don't deserve to be in your life, then you might find this really quite challenging. But if if you wanted to sort of test this for yourself and think of this as a moment of testing your self-reliance, testing your self-value, testing your values and ideas on goodness. Like, for instance, if you were to hold the thought that my life is about quality, I offer quality, and I'm going to stand in my quality, that is a very, very different message and premise to hold about yourself for Friday and over the next few days, and just the other side of Friday too. If you were to hold yourself in that poise, I wonder what might happen as a consequence. But if you pick into the scarcity journey and the not good enough journey, which is quite attractive to a lot of people, it's very easy to go into that victimhood, then this aspect on Friday, I think, could really take hold. So choose your thoughts really, really wisely. Maybe it's time to channel the Mary Poppins. Maybe it's time to channel that Julie Andrews energy. And, there are really great things about Saturn and Venus when they work together, like keeping your word, recognizing the commitment that you've got within your existing relationships. And maybe it's okay to have boundaries with certain people. If certain people are bringing in hurtful situations, hurtful slights, maybe you do want to keep them at arm's length for a little bit. So this is about you being the chooser, not being the recipient of someone else's sloppiness. So I hope that's helpful to you. Ultimately, I think, do you value yourself enough to take yourself seriously? And that's a really, really strong message. Now, aside from that, so that is, underpinning things, but there's some really exciting things going on with the moon aspects, which I think are giving us a lot of support. So we've got the moon in a trine to Jupiter, which I think is darling. I think it's really, really lovely. The moon in a trine to Jupiter is showing your need to open up and your feelings of generosity, and feelings of goodness, and feelings of, yes, all is right with the world. The moon is also in a trine with Saturn. And so that's really, really helping Saturn, if anything. It's showing that you can be poised and you can open yourself up with grace and ease. So it's not gushing, Saturn is definitely not gushing here, but it's helping you. The support from Jupiter and Saturn is showing a growth, but a steady growth, an opening, but you're making sure the doors don't just get pushed wide open. So Venus is also going to be in a sextile with the moon later on. In fact, the moon is very helpful. The moon and Jupiter are very helpful to both Venus and Saturn. So one thing I would say, the moon shows us our feelings. This might be the way to manage Friday really beautifully, and that is, watch your feelings. If a feeling comes up and you instantly think, I feel insecure, I don't feel as good as I did a moment ago, something's off, that is a red flag. That's a moment for you to say, okay, Louisa said this might happen. I'm going to take a step out, grab a glass of water, have a deep breath, and just, what happened? What changed? What in that moment changed my feelings? And if you can identify that, that's a real indication that something was coming in that was plugging into an earlier feeling about yourself of maybe, I'm not good enough, or whatever it is, whatever triggered. This is the vigilance I think would be very helpful on Friday. Coincidentally, if during the day you're feeling good about something, that's an indication that you're on the right track. So use your feelings as your guidance, and also stay on the slightly frosty but perfect side. Be your Mary Poppins. I think Mary Poppins is actually probably a good guide for this particular day. So I hope that's helpful. Lots and lots of love to you. And yeah, catch you in tomorrow's episode. Bye for now.